And it just seems like there's so much more depth now of people saying, that's not what this is about. God doesn't care if you go 0 for 4, 4 for 4. He doesn't care if you shoot a 67 on the course. That's not going to make him love you any more or less. And I think athletes are really starting to tap into that because these sports are hard and they're going to let you down.
This is the Legacy Maker Show.
Hey guys, welcome again to another episode of Legacy Makers. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. I am super grateful for each and every one of you. We continue to explore what it means to live a life with purpose, with power, and legacy. But today, we got someone really, truly special. It's incredible. I'm so stoked. He's a former college athlete who turned into a kingdom builder. He's a founder of Identify Sports, a movement to help athletes discover their identity in Christ. And he's the host of a powerful identity sports podcast. But beyond all these stats and success, he has a testimony that I believe with all of my heart that will shake your soul and will inspire you to walk boldly in your own purpose. So would I ask you to please help me welcome Zach today with us. Zach, thank you so much for being with us, my brother. How you doing today?
Great, Roger. Thanks for having us today.
Man, it is so exciting to have you, my friend. I've been reading a lot about you and listen to your own testimony. It really has inspired me, and I know that today is gonna be an inspirational to many people. So why don't we just start from that beginning? Why don't you tell us about your life growing up and how sports all of a sudden became a big part of your identity in your early life?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to clarify. So I'm not the founder of Identity Sports.
Okay.
It was actually founded in 2006 as Tales from the Tour, but I've been lucky to serve as the executive director the past 2 years. We rebranded from Tales from the Tour to Identity Sports. So kind of leading the charge on that rebrand. But yeah, so I'm married now. I got a 2-year-old daughter. I've been married for 4 years to my wife, Michelle. But really kind of before we got to that stage, I accepted Christ when I was 6 and was raised in a Christian home. And I was one of those kids that thought I had a boring testimony. So I remember praying like, man, I don't want to be that kid with a boring testimony, there's no such thing as a boring testimony, but I was like, man, give me something good. Like I want to be able to change, hearts and minds and for the gospel. And that was a dangerous prayer. So don't pray that unless you are ready to be thrown into the fire. But man, so I accepted Christ when I was 6, and the very next prayer was, make me a Major League Baseball player, I'll share your word. Kind of as if dying on the cross wasn't enough, do one more thing for me. So really not the right mindset, but so I kind of lived like that. And when I was 8 years old, I was playing in a summer baseball tournament, and, I was running, I hit a ball to the right field gap, rounded first, realized I was probably going to get thrown out if I went all the way to second. So come back to first, slide in, kind of like a pop-up slide, give the coach a high five, and just dropped. Really just kind of remember like laying on the ground, seeing coaches, people standing over me, not really knowing what was going on, the trees kind of blurring into vision, just kind of a terrifying moment. Doctors get there, say, it's just dehydration, you're okay. So continue living the same way of trying to use God to get what I wanted. And a couple years later, same scenario happens again. I'm in another summer baseball tournament. This time I step on third and kind of start to lose consciousness, and my coach kind of realizes it, steadies me, and my parents come down and like there's something wrong here, and go to the hospital. And that very day I got diagnosed with a thing called long QT syndrome, which is you get too much adrenaline to your heart and it could cause you to pass out or have a heart attack just like that. So I was lucky that all it was me passing out, and not anything more serious than that. But so I had this dream of becoming a Major League Baseball player. And, as a 10-year-old boy, the doctor looked at me that day and was like, you will never play baseball again. Don't even run around a flagpole. And so we talk about our identity. My whole life was, I had already planned out. I knew what I was going to do. And at that age, to be told that I'm never going to be able to do that was just, I didn't know what to do. So naturally that just progressed into a depression, all of a sudden anxiety attacks left and right, didn't know who I was. Like, it sounds silly, but even at 10, like at school, like the basketball team you were on at lunch was whatever little league team you were on. We were just competitive like that. And so I suddenly felt like I had no place. I had no purpose. Didn't know who I was because you asked me who I was. I say, I'm Zach Vogel. I'm a baseball player. So I chose to be angry at God. I was like, you say you love me so much. Why would you let something like this happen to me? So I just kind of lived in that fear and that depression and anxiety and frustration for a few years. One day my mom came up to me and was like, you know what, Zach, it's like we lost our son. You're a completely different person. And, as a boy, that's hard to hear from your mom, but she was right. And so went back to my room, came across, the verses Philippians 4:13. Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work heartily is something done for the Lord and not for men. And that was kind of my aha moment of like, man, I'm really screwing this life thing up.
Wow.
So it's kind of like a rededication of, you know what, God, if I never play sports again, no matter what it be, I'm going to use the story that you've given me to make your name known and to encourage others.
Zach, let me just kind of. I'm super excited about what kind of interested to see what happens next. But if we can zone into here a little bit, because you're talking about being a young man, a boy, still 10 years old, and all these things are beginning to almost happen in your mind as you had goals and you had aspirations and you had dreams and all these things, and all of a sudden those begin to crashing down on you, and you begin to feel empty. But many people think you as a boy you just kind of like just living. But can you kind of tell us a little bit about what did it mean for you as a boy? Did you feel like it was affecting you in your behavior, in the way that you treat others or your parents, or the way that you begin to almost like without realizing you were letting your frustration of the unreachable now come almost like this wall? Can you walk us a little bit through that? Because I know a lot of people, Zach, that have gone through, they're adults, they're grown people, and they have never dealt with certain things that they, or dreams, aspirations that they had as a boy, as a young man. So can you walk us through that a little bit, and then we just keep going on the next step?
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's fun to see now because my wife actually has her master's in marriage and family therapy, and
Oh
she
wow.
specializes with kids. And so it's fun to like talk to her about the feelings I had during that time
Mm.
and just to see the different things. And so it's just awesome what she does and they're able to help kids with. But yeah, you literally build up a wall of everything. I mean, it was like I went from being the most athletic kid in class to during PE they would play dodgeball or something, and I would have to sit on the curb and just watch. And so I felt like all of my friends and stuff were because of who I was as a baseball player. And so when you take that away, I mean, it was literally like whenever I remember my mom arranged for one of my friends to come over and hang out, and I just felt like a charity case. Like I felt like the kid was only there because our moms arranged it. And so I just kind of felt like, man, I'm alone in this. I don't have friends. And so the enemy, when you go through those things, the enemy wants you to hold up and he doesn't want you to talk about it. He wants you to feel like you are the only person in the world that's ever felt like that, the only person that's going through it. And so you don't share anything. And that just builds up that anxiety and that frustration to literally like we would be somewhere and like I'd almost have like those out of body experiences where I felt like, am I actually here right now? Like, are these people just living and just kind of watching me in this bubble, almost like the Truman Show kind of thing? Yeah, it was just a weird time where
Wow.
hold up, I didn't open up about anything, and yeah, it was just weird.
Wow. When was that moment then you're going through this in your identity crisis and all that stuff? When was that moment that you felt almost like that surrender moment to where all of a sudden your heart changes and then things begin to change, and how did they change? If you can just walk us through what happened after that, because right now you're in this almost like you can't do nothing. You're just a little, a show guy or a show kid, and all of a sudden now you had to go through this moment of I'm letting it go. And how did that happen, and what happened after that?
Yeah, and that was really, I remember one night I felt like I couldn't breathe and I ran to my parents' room and was like, I can't breathe, something's going on. And so they call the ambulance. Ambulance comes in, do different tests, and they're like, it's he just had a panic attack, you should probably get counseling. So started seeing a counselor, started to kind of learn to talk through some of these things. And then really the moment was my mom kind of opening up about just you don't realize how it affects other people too. I was so walled up and selfish in me, but I wasn't really realizing how it affected, the rest of my family, my two sisters, things like that. And my mom saying, you know what, it's like we lost our son. You're a completely different person. That was kind of that realization moment. And then turning back to scripture. And it was really kind of the first time too, like a lot of athletes use Philippians 4:13 as I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Okay, I can be a Major League Baseball player because he's going to empower me. And that's not necessarily, if you read, the context of what that verse means, that it's basically you can go through the trials that life comes because of God's strength. And so it doesn't mean I'm going to get what I want or need or what I think is best for me. But no matter what I go through, God's going to be there and he's going to give me the strength to go through it. And that was kind of that click for me.
That's really, really good. So then were you able to go back to play after all the diagnosis and all these things that you had to go through? Did you get the opportunity to go back? Did you feel, okay, I'm surrendering and now, and then once you surrender, truly surrender? I think this is the issue sometimes I see, Zach, is people don't really surrender. Like almost like, here, if I don't do this ever again, I'm cool with it. I'm completely at peace. And when you did that, can you walk us what happened after that? Were you able to go back, or that was it for you and in the sports arena and in baseball as a whole?
Yeah, and that was that moment of kind of surrender of, man, if I never play sports again, that's okay. I'm gonna find who I am, as my identity is rooted as a child of God and not in the sport or what I do for a living. And so started going on mission trips and sharing my testimony and just the testimony of losing, my dream and seeing how that affected people, and people were encouraged by that and it caused them to open up. So I kind of just poured into that and going on mission trips and getting super involved in youth group. And every year we had to go to the doctors and do different tests, see where we're at, and long QT it's still kind of, not a lot of people know a ton about it. And a lot of doctors at that time didn't know a ton about it either. So they really never knew what to do. And, my mom was reading a book, A Purpose Driven Life, in the waiting room. And one of the nurses saw that. They struck up a conversation, and she put us in touch with the leading doctor of long QT at Rochester, Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic. And we jumped on a plane, went straight there, and he kind of walked us through this process of this surgery that I could have that would allow me to go back to playing sports. And so long story short, I ended up being the 8th person in the US to have this surgery. They go in, they kind of cauterize some of the adrenal glands. So I don't sweat on the left side of my body now. That's one of like the weird side effects of the surgery.
Wow.
But after the surgery, he's like, you know what, Zach, you can go back to your life, basically. And so they go, okay, God, like, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. And so my freshman year, it took me a couple years to build up the confidence again. But my freshman year of high school was my first year playing baseball again. And kind of felt like the coaches just kind of let me on the team because they knew the backstory and kind of like a charity case. But God gave me like two versions of like, sport used selfishly in the wrong way. But then the second chance, this redemption of, I'm going to let you use sports for how I intended it to be, which is just another opportunity to bring the gospel to your teammates. And so that's the way I looked at it. And I was in the cages every time the door was open. Friday nights, Saturday nights, I was at a batting cage somewhere, just pouring into that and trying to live my life in such a way where I can lead Bible studies and be a living testimony.
Wow.
Was blessed to eventually get recruited to Arizona Christian University, where I was able to play 4 years of college baseball. And just to be able to say that when you look back at my 10-year-old and 11-year-old self is just nuts to think of where God brought that story.
Man, that is incredible. That is amazing that you played 4 years of college after all of that. Even the mere fear of what could happen and being able to overcome that fear, that is absolutely legit. And I know, Zach, there's a lot of men that I encounter with, and the very fear that they have prevents them from going to step to the place that God wants them to go, and you being able to overcome the fear, to collapse and to something might happen is remarkable. So sports has always been something that you felt very passionate about. Where did this whole desire begin to use this platform into getting involved with sports in the level that you are even today?
Yeah, and I kind of felt like it was just like a growing passion and calling in my life of like, I have this crazy testimony in sports and there's got to be a reason why, right? I don't, and kind of like my sophomore year of college, so this One of the specific reasons I chose to go to ACU, I got recruited by a couple other smaller schools, but I chose them because of you get a biblical studies minor. You basically have to graduate, but for me that was fantastic. I wanted that biblically based, and all the coaching staff, were Christian as well. And so it's kind of like this opportunity to really grow and learn what sport is supposed to be like and how God can use sports. And so it just kind of kept growing in me that that's what I felt called to do. When I would go on mission trips, we go to the Dominican Republic, and it would be a specifically baseball mission trip. So we do these baseball camps at these local villages, and like hundreds of kids and adults would come out of nowhere and just be around. And we just sports was that common language of like being able to share a little bit of sports stuff, just built that trust. And it opened the door for me then to share about where my true hope comes from. And at some point, every athlete has to hang up the cleats. And you hear all of these stories of these athletes when they hang it up, they don't know what to do with themselves, and they blow their money, they get into other things. And so that's where like this heart of, identity sports is just like it's so real in every athlete that your identity can't be found in things of this world, because when it's lost, you're going to be left with nothing. And every athlete, from the podcast, the live events that we do, every athlete has similar stories of an injury or something they've overcome. Even though it might look easy when you watch them on Sundays or whatever, it's not. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, the enemy wants you to hole up and not share about it. And so through Identity Sports, we're kind of able to provide that platform where athletes can share that. And then I think back of when I was that, young boy going through that. I mean, this is exactly the organization that I wish I could have turned to when I was going through that, because these guys are sharing these real stories of how Jesus has come in at the darkest time and has uplifted them and got them through what they're going through.
Man, that is so powerful. I think you say something that is so true and so powerful. Remember going to an orphan's home with my son. He was a soccer player, and we used to collect all the old cleats from the other teammates, and we would just load up our stuff, and we go to this orphan's home. And I'm telling you, when you show up with these used cleats and used uniforms and used jerseys, it's so, I mean, their eyes just lit up. It's like, the greatest thing they could gotten, especially if you bring soccer balls. To them was almost like, I don't want anything else. This is so that common. And then my son was able to make that connection just through sports. So it was one of those just powerful things that I believe are continuing to inspire so many people through sports. So that's so powerful. But one thing that you said is that you're dealing with high performing athletes even now in your business, but you are helping them to shift their mind into just being a performance to have a purpose filled athletes. How do you help them to achieve that? What is some of the things that you guys do that help these athletes to there is a mind shift that has to happen up here for them to truly recognize that, I'm not just being a performer, but I have a purpose doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And our whole mission with Identity Sports is to help athletes and sports fans around the world find their identity in Christ. And so we do that through every other week. We have a podcast that we put out. We do live events and Tales from the Tour, Tales from the Dugout, where we'll have professional baseball or professional golfers on stage, just share those raw stories. And so, I think of my sports heroes growing up, and one of my favorites was Tim Salmon, who actually happens to be a strong Christian athlete. But man, when you look up to those guys, that you almost kind of put them on a pedestal or idolize, for lack of a better word. But when you hear those guys that you think are like the coolest thing ever and you aspire to be them, when you hear the inside of their story, it just makes you connect so much. And one of my favorite stories that has come out of this is Ted Scott. He's Scotty Scheffler's caddy. He's been part of 4 different Masters tournament wins. And he shared a story about how the second win, when he was with Bubba Watson, Bubba calls him, a couple days later after winning his second Masters, and he's like, "What's the point?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean, what's the point?" He's like, "I just won the Masters for the second time. I'm supposed to feel like I'm on top of the world." And he's like, "I feel like nothing happened. I just feel normal. It's not what I expected it to be." And so when you take these young athletes and you're aspiring of saying, "Hey, if I can just win a World Series, I'll be fulfilled. If I just make the major leagues, I'll be fulfilled." And these fence posts just keep moving farther and farther because they hit the one achievement, don't feel the way that they expected to feel, and say, "Okay, there's got to be something else." And then to hear at the highest level of these athletes say, "No, there's not. You're not going to feel how expect to. And there is something more, and that answer is Jesus. You will never find true fulfillment in this sport. You will only find fulfillment in Christ. And so, us helping amplify those stories from those players. We do some new things with devotionals, but kind of always using those like athlete stories to kind of guide, different athletes and sports fans through that in their faith.
Wow. I've seen more than ever athletes being very bold with their faith. And I truly believe that there is people or entities like yourself or that are allowing athletes to recognize, I can only do so much, but I need the help of the Lord to help me to not only, impact in the field, but also impact beyond the field. And I think that is remarkable that you guys are doing that. And you mentioned that you also launch a podcast to help athletes to come and share. But what inspired you to start that, and how is a podcast being impacting even young kids as they listening to these athletes? Is being vulnerable, open, and transparent.
Yeah. So Identity Sports was founded as Tales from the Tour in 2006 from a guy named Hugh Ilsley. And basically his passion was the same, of to use sports as a tool to share the gospel. And so they would do these live events. And the live events would reach thousands and would be really, really good. But if you weren't at the live event, you kind of missed out on the story. You didn't get to hear the testimonies from some of these high value athletes. And so over time, we've got a board of about 8 guys. And over time, God just kind of started to put more and more on our heart of we want to reach more, and we want to reach the youth. And, where is the youth? The youth is on TikTok, Instagram, social media. They're on all of these things, and we feel called to help bring the gospel to them. So how can we do that? So initially we just started live streaming the events, so you didn't have to be physically in there. And we started seeing people all over the country start watching this event. And then we're like, okay, let's take, 30 seconds of this clip and start putting on TikTok and Instagram. And all of a sudden, in a couple months, we're over 1 million views in 60 different countries of people hearing the gospel through these little shorts on social media. And, our live events, we usually have 3 or 4 athletes on stage. And so sometimes it's hard to dive super deep with all of those athletes in basically an hour and a half span. And so you hear some buzzwords of like Christian athlete, things like that. And so we're like, we need a platform where we can dive super deep with one guy and help people understand of, okay, this guy mentioned he's a Christian athlete. What does that actually look like? How do you live that out on the field? What does that look like in the weight room? What does it look like, interacting with fans? And so the podcast gave us that perfect blend of we can take these guys that we have on stage and we can just dive into their faith journey and how they live that out. One guy talks about just the power of availability. He's not in the locker room preaching Christ all the time, but the team knows his belief and they know that he is available to chat whenever they want to come. So guys will come up to him and just talk about life things because they know he's there. And so it just opens doors and gives athletes, as they're growing in their potential, these opportunities to then apply that to their career of how can they make a difference where God has them planted right now. And yeah, we've seen some stories just from that. One of my favorites is we had Jason Adam of the Padres. They're in the middle of a playoff hunt last year, and he flew in to play the Diamondbacks. They got in at like 2 a.m. and at 8 a.m. he could have slept until noon or whatever till their game. Instead, on short rest in a playoff hunt, he comes over, dedicates his time to do a podcast episode with us and share what God's doing in his life. Comes, does a podcast, goes on and plays. Couple weeks later, that episode gets aired, and there's a couple Padres fans, a kid and a dad, and they listen to that and kind of hearing his testimony of how, it's like how to basically act when you lose and things like that. And the Padres ended up losing in the playoffs last year. But that gave the opportunity for his son was bummed because the Padres lost. And that episode of listening to Jason's testimony was enough for them to have that, Jesus conversation of just basically how to deal with disappointment and stuff in sport. And so you hear those things, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, is help parents and families have that conversation.
Wow, that is so powerful, man. And I believe that many athletes, as you interviewing them and as they are being vulnerable, they're opening up to, to realize, man, my purpose is beyond this moment. I mean, think about Tim Tebow, one of the great, beyond he did the same thing every single time. He wrote the same thing on his, under his eyes, and same, John 3:16. And that began. So he was creating a legacy that still today. And with that, I wanna ask you, Zach, why is it that when athletes are vulnerable, they come to you, they share their stories, they become just what I call hot, honest, open, and transparent with you? What do you think is so important for people as a whole to be open and to be honest and to be transparent in order for them to build their own legacy as they are continuing to walk in their own path and in their journey in their own purpose?
Yeah, and I mean, number one, I think sharing your story is super healing for yourself. It also gives you the opportunity. I've heard a lot of guys will share their story, and then I'll get a call the next day or something and be like, man, I didn't realize all the places and times that God had his hand truly on my life the whole time. It just gives you that reflection of so many times you're like, especially as an athlete, you like weight room, lunch, meal, stretching, batting practice, like your whole day is already mapped out, and you just go through the motions, and you don't really take that time to reflect on everything that God is doing in your life and all the times he's been present even when things were hard. And I think athletes are just kind of going through, a transition where they're almost used to seeing, like, when I was younger in sports, you would pray before at bats, God, help me get a hit, help me, like those kind of like, and it just seems like there's so much more depth now of people saying, that's not what this is about. God doesn't care if you go 0 for 4, 4 for 4. He doesn't care if you shoot a 67 on the course. That's not going to make him love you any more or less. And I think athletes are really starting to tap into that, because these sports are hard and they're going to let you down. I don't believe that being a Christian makes you a better athlete, like some people might think when they first start in their relationship with Christ. But I think there's some aspects to it that could make you perform better. And that's just in the aspect of letting go. And it's almost like you're playing like a kid again. Like the game becomes fun. You're not putting all of this stress on you, because at the end of the day who you are. You're still a husband, you're still a wife, you still have that family at home. You're secure in that, and that alone can help you perform better on the field. And I think that's the legacy that these athletes are trying to build. Is before you used to only see them as what you saw on the field, but now they're showing that side of you, like Scotty Scheffler winning a tournament and saying he's still going to go home and make dinner for his family, or like they live the same life. He drove the same car he's making millions, and he drove the same, I think he put like 200,000 miles on a Tahoe. Like, it's just this different thing of these guys understanding who they are outside of the sport. And then they're giving us these glimpses to let you know that in the business world, you're not the value of your last sale or what your boss thinks of you, to just encourage people to show them that, hey, life is much more than your performance, and your calling is to share the gospel and use that platform to inspire others and encourage people to live and seek out who Jesus is.
Man, that's really powerful. Really, really powerful, Zach. And I believe that many people are thinking, man, do I even have a story to share? Do I even matter? That what I'm doing matters. And I think what you just shared is so powerful, because one of the things that I've learned through the years is that the greatest ministry is the ministry that you don't have a mic. Many times we think, okay, my ministry depends on how many people I'm ministering to. I'm sharing the word, but sometimes not saying a word, and with your own behavior, in the way that you conduct yourself, the way that you treat others, that speaks a lot louder than any word that sometimes we may say. So before I jump into four pop-up questions I want to ask you, Zach. If you can just tell me, how do you feel you yourself are making your own legacy? One of the things about this podcast is to realize that people are listening, guys are listening, that they are in their journey to make their own legacy that would transcend them. But what are you doing to build that legacy? And even right now, as you're making your legacy, what do you feel that that God is calling you specifically during this journey that you're in, as you're running your business and you're doing this and that, the other? How are you making your own personal legacy?
Yeah, and I think it's pretty unique at just 31 to be able to say I truly feel like I'm where God called me to be. And like I feel like this is what he was preparing me all along the way. I mean, my 6 years in digital advertising gave me the skills to do the social platform and to know how to kind of help amplify some of these things to get the reach that we have. And so I think it's unique that I can say that I truly feel that this is what God is calling my family and I too. And even when we were presented with this opportunity, I mean, it's full-time ministry. We're raising support, we're doing all these things. And what should be the scariest time for me to do that with a wife and a 2-year-old daughter, my wife kind of came to me and was like, this is it. Like, I truly feel like this is where God is calling us. And so we took the leap of faith. I quit my job and here we are, 2.5 years later, still going strong and just trying to go where God leads us. And I think one of the things is up until I got to this point, I always was like, I knew I had a calling to sports ministry, but I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to start. And I just felt like, okay, someday maybe God will provide the right opportunity. But I think looking back, and I still hopefully have a have a lot more to go, but you are already in your legacy. It's not something that you're hoping to achieve one day. Like your legacy is happening right now. Even if you don't feel like you're at the full calling yet, you're still in the middle of it. And I look back and saying, okay, I needed the testimony. I needed to go through that pain and that suffering and depression because now it's giving me the way to be able to work with athletes or people that are going through the same thing. I needed to go through the year of sales experience that I hated because it's helped me work in certain different things. And then I needed to go through this pain. I needed to go through the 6 years of digital advertising where sometimes I felt stuck of like, there's got to be something more than helping people sell eyelashes or gym memberships. Like I just knew that there was something bigger for me. But the way that I carried myself in those 6 years and different things helped build the relationships. I mean, business is relationships. And so don't take those relationships for granted. And so just be super conscious where you are at now that you are building a legacy. The people I interacted with in each one of those jobs, I still have on LinkedIn. They see what I'm doing now and they see the way that I live there and it matches up. And so that would really just be the encouragement for people listening to this that are like, okay, cool, awesome. He found his legacy. I still don't know what mine is. I don't know what it's going to be. You may be 55, you may be 12. You're in your legacy now and be conscious of that and keep cultivating it and building it. And then one day you'll be able to look back and see what your legacy has been this whole time that maybe was hidden to you at the moment.
Bro, that was a big drop. That was amazing, bro. Thank you so much. That was really encouraging and very well said. It's almost like building a wall, and I think what you were saying, I imagine each stone is part of that wall. What we call it a legacy. Every area that you're involved right now, and that's really powerful. And I would encourage everybody to really zone into what Zach just said, because your legacy doesn't start later, or that's you right now writing your legacy, and how you transcend through painful situations, through situations that may not be favorable, even your own faults or your own failures or your own shame, all those things that you may think, I just want to remove them. Those are actually stepping stones to continue to create your legacy. So that's really good. 4 questions I want to ask you, Zach, before we wrap it up. There is a generation of men who are lost in performance and titles and hustle, and even in the business world, as you were mentioning. What is your word for them? What is something that you want them to zone into as they're putting all this effort into all these accolades and all these things that they're doing? What is the word that you want to give them with?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really just to be present. I mean, as men, a lot of times we think back of the past of if we would have done things differently, if I would have taken this job or moved to there or whatever, or you think of in the future of, man, if I want to be here in 5 years, I want to be here in 3 years. And when you're just finding yourself in always that hope, or like trying to put your hope always in something else that could be attainable, you're just really going to miss a lot of what's happening around you now. You're going to miss out on your kids' lives. You're being present with your wife. And it's the same thing. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, what I'm saying now is something that, like, even like my identity is, how does my identity not become identity sports now? Even though that I'm trying to tell people your identity is in Christ, but it's what I say every day. It's what I do. It's like my mind, your mind can become consumed with it. And so I just encourage people just to slow down and be present and really think through those. And one verse that kind of comes to mind a lot is 1 Peter 4:10. 10 through 11, it says, based on the gift each one has received, use it to serve others as good managers of the varied grace of God. If anyone speaks, it should be as one who speaks God's words. If anyone serves, it should be from the strength God provides, so that God may be glorified through Jesus Christ in everything. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. And so wherever you're at right now, whether you're a sales executive, whether you're working out of Baskin Robbins, I mean, you are called to do that to the glory of God and find a way to do that where you're at.
That is so good. That is so good. Thank you, Zach. Yeah, that's 100%, 100%. Be present. Thank you so much. And Zach, for many of our viewers, how can they support identity sports? How can they get involved? What can they do to help this incredible organization that you guys have that helps incredible athletes find their own journey, their own legacy, as they're building their own platforms themselves?
Yeah, I appreciate that question and asking that. You can find us at identitysports.com. Find us on Instagram, Identity Sports Official, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just check it out and tell your friends about it. I mean, it's all of our content's free. Our live events are free, and we do that because we want to break down barriers to people hearing the gospel. We don't want that to be a cost to ever be a barrier to someone hearing Jesus. And so really just check it out and listen and follow along on the journey and share it with your friends and families. And there's lots of youth leagues that we're trying to get connected with, because kids just need to hear this, in their developmental years. It can, literally be life and death to some of these kids hearing this encouragement. And so doing that, and then, yeah, we'd love to have you guys at an event sometime. We're expanding kind of across the US. We've done an event in Dallas. We've done some events in California. So yeah, check it out that way. And then we are fully donor funded. So if you do feel the call to invest in the kingdom or what God is doing through Identity Sports, there's different ways to do that as well.
That was very, very encouraging, and thank you so much, Zach. I really, really, really enjoyed it, and there is just so much. I wish we can have a lot more time, and hopefully we do another segment. But hearing your story, hearing your journey, hearing your own passion, your own disappointments, and then hearing how you came from that and found your own purpose, and realizing, man, if I went through all of that as a young child, what is all these athletes have they gone through? And then investing in the next generation. So thank you so much for what you are doing, for what your organization is doing. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for sharing your time with us and sharing your story and investing daily on the next generation. Because at the end of the day, the next generation is the one that is going to see this, that is going to see what you guys are doing, and are gonna their idol, the people that they idolize, they're gonna see them as being human and being completely vulnerable, allowing God to continue to work in their life. So Zach, thank you, my friend, so very much. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast, and I'm excited to see how God just uses this episode and uses the legacy that you're building, Roger. I mean, thank you for all that you do, pouring in and helping amplify the stories that God is doing through his servants. And so thank you for all that you're doing as well.
Thank you so much, guys. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Thank you so much for being with us. I would just continue to encourage you to share with somebody. One life can be impacted through this episode, so don't miss the opportunity to share with somebody. Give it a like, subscribe, so you can get notifications when there is new episodes dropping. So as always, thank you. God bless you, and continue to make your own legacy today. God bless you.